Hello to our dear watchers and listeners, and welcome back to Cocktail Party Politics for our second ever episode.
Yes, we hope you enjoyed our first episode, and boy, do we have a lot to get into. It has been a week.
So much has happened, both in and out of the Beltway. I think the obvious place to start is that breaking news from yesterday afternoon up in Boston.
Yes, Karen Reed.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. She was found not guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter for the 2022 killing of her former boyfriend.
Yeah. She was charged with the lesser offense that I'm surprised she didn't even plead guilty to, because it was already acknowledged that it was a fact of the case of driving while under the influence, for which the prosecutor that was trying to put her away in jail for decades is now just seeking a year of probation and mandatory drug counseling, as is standard for a first-time DUI.
Yeah, I mean, and, did you see the crowd outside the courthouse? I mean, as soon as that verdict came through and it was read, I mean, there were just crowds cheering and cheering. Now,
this has been such a huge case in the news, both for the true crime public fascination of it all, but you also have the criminal justice more broadly angle with the victim and many of the other people of interest all being police officers.
Correct. And, there's, the defense tried to play that it was, a cover-up by the police that tried to frame her, for this when, their whole defense was that, he was actually injured inside this party that ultimately led to his tragic passing. So, I mean, in a sense you can say that, there was, in a sense, justice served in the sense that, Karen Reed was found not guilty, but, there still hasn't really been true justice to the victim of this crime because we truly don't know what happened.
I don't know if I believe that she did it or not, but I know I'm happy that she was found not guilty because so much in the case doesn't add up that
Exactly.
I couldn't imagine them reaching the threshold of reasonable doubt. And this is the second jury that's been unable to, convict this woman because there's not enough evidence. Unfortunately, we likely will never know what actually happened at this party that led to this man's tragic demise. But it doesn't look like she did it.
No, I would say that, justice came down on the right side today.
Oh, completely.
Now, we see this, there are these cases that happen all across the country that attract attention. So, we saw it with OJ back in the 90s. We saw it with, Casey Anthony, other cases that have come up.
Amanda Knox.
Yes, that have come up. Why do you think that it's some cases that gain traction or kind of resonate with the nation and, others kind of don't? What do you think it was about this case specifically that really brought the attention? You saw outside the courthouse. People. It was a lot of women there. They were all wearing pink. That's Karen's favorite color. And you saw the moment that verdict come down.
Are you in honor of this verdict with your outfit today?
Yes. Well, and also, we're recording this on Wednesday, and on Wednesdays we do wear pink.
Oopsie.
No.
I have my watch.
Yeah, you're good.
I think to answer that question, I think this case has a lot going for it. There's a lot of mystery to it. A lot of these big cases that generate a lot of attention, it's fairly obvious. The other major murder that is sweeping the news stations, right, in Kohberger's trial for those
the tragic
four
slaying.
Kids at the sorority house, a devastating story. But I think this case is a little more gripping in a way that is just tragic, because not that this one isn't tragic, but there's something more mysterious to it because everyone was drunk, because the injuries don't line up with what is said to have happened, because no one really remembers what happened that night, and there are inconsistencies in both the defense and the prosecution's case. Why did a man who allegedly got hit by a car have no bruising on his body and only blunt force trauma to the head? Why did it kind of look like his body was moved to where he was ultimately found, and that they don't really know where he actually died? But why did her friend Google how long it takes to freeze to death at 2:30 a.m. the night of this man's tragic passing. None of these things... Oftentimes when there are a crime that the case doesn't really add up, it doesn't add up on one side.
Yes.
So everyone can kind of agree, okay, this is what the conspiracy is, this is what the inconsistencies are. This is why we think what happened. You see that with the O.J. Simpson case. Every inconsistency in O.J.'s story was on the side of, well, we all know where the civil case of that story went.
Yes, yes.
With the Brian Kohberger case, everything mysterious and unusual in that case is showing that the alleged perpetrator likely did what he's being accused of. Again, all alleged.
Yes.
That one, he's not been convicted in a court of law yet. But this case is so compelling because there isn't one clear narrative that is being driven by the evidence.
Yeah, and there wasn't kind of like a single smoking gun that really answered the question of what happened. So I think people are tuning in, possibly, you know, the information that they're getting from watching this trial maybe is going to help. Maybe they themselves are trying to solve the case, so anything that they, you know, hear on the news or see from watching this, you know, they want to put their detective hat on and try to figure out what happened and, you know, answer that question for themselves.
I also think there's something very human and accessible about this case that resonates with a lot of people. I think a lot of people know that couple that's in a sort of a very loving but also very combative and somewhat toxic relationship. And it's, could they hurt each other, really? That those people you know. Or
maybe even you yourself have been in that situation.
A lot of people have been to house parties. A lot of people have either been or seen their friends overdo it at somebody's house and have gaps. These are situations that I think a lot of people could either see themselves or their friends in. So even if you're not, you know, a big partier, I think a lot of people have seen people overdo it at parties. People have seen these very messy and combative relationships, and people understand. People know these people.
Yes. I think a lot of people probably saw this case and this couple, and they, either they themselves or somebody in their life had been in similar relationships, so they could relate to that. And I think maybe that's one of the many reasons why this case has captivated the nation.
And I think there's a third thing, which is the conspiracy theories regarding police corruption.
Correct.
The fact that the victim was a cop, the fact that many of the people at this party were cops, the fact that the defense is alleging that there has been either a cover-up or even a framing of Karen Reed by the police officer friends of the victim. Those allegations are, well, out of a movie, basically.
Yes.
And when life can seem stranger than fiction, or at least allegations in a court case have an almost cinematic quality, that drives attention because people want to know, could that happen to me?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's take it back a couple days now. Let's talk about what happened this past weekend. So, a lot of things happened. So, on Saturday, it was Flag Day, and President Trump hosted a parade celebrating the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army.
Which, beautifully, in a moment of poetic symbolism, I believe, coincided nicely with our president's birthday.
Yes, President Trump turned 79 on Saturday, and we all know President Trump loves our military. He loves the men and women that serve this country.
And he loves a parade. He loves the pomp and circumstance of a big rally, a big event. So he combined those loves.
Yes, but also in tandem with President Trump's, with the parade honoring the Army, what else was going on? You had a series of No Kings protests going on, which is so ironic to me because aren't kings just anointed? They're not duly elected.
We had a No Kings protest 250 years ago.
Yes. I mean, Are these people living
We
in...
won.
Yes. Are these people just living in such an alternate reality that they don't realize that President Trump was duly elected by over 77 million voters?
Well, of course, they are not living in reality because they cannot comprehend a world where the Republicans have opinions and that there are actually people who agree with the president's agenda and his campaign promises and want conservative values being put into our government, who care about things like immigration and crime and the economy. That is anathema to their worldview.
Yes, I mean, it's just, again, I said this on the last podcast, it's common sense. You know, we need to have closed borders. We can't just have a free-for-all, no control over who's coming into our country. And again, you know, it's just common sense. Biological men should not be playing in women's sports. These are 80-20 issues, and President Trump is on the 80% side of these issues.
If you want to talk about some of the irony with these No Kings protests, America's cultural hegemony is such that there were No Kings protests in European countries that have kings.
Amazing.
They were not protesting their own kings, mind you. They were protesting that some Americans are throwing a temper tantrum about not liking their president.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely ridiculous. I mean
this...
monarchies are protesting our president by saying, no kings in America. There aren't.
No, I mean, again, it just goes back, you know, Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, that needs to really be entered into...
The DSM-5?
Yes. And we need a cure. Or somebody needs to, define it.
I think the cure is just watching and reading and listening, and
I think getting news from a variety of different sources.
Oh, I completely agree, but a lot of the people with Trump derangement syndrome, they're only listening to what the left is telling them.
Very true.
They're hearing these false statements taken out of context or skewed completely about what Trump is doing and saying. And it's this game of telephone where the end result is nothing like what is actually happening. People have these talk about misinformation. The left is putting out such astronomically false, provably false statements about Trump and his agenda.
Yes, but people are choosing to believe it, and it's, you notice this, these people with Trump derangement, I mean, it's like all-encompassing. It's taking over their entire lives, and they just don't know how to function. And I would say to them, think about it truly. How has your life changed since President Trump returned to office? I would ask somebody that. Explain to me how your life has changed.
If anything, most people's lives should be going for the better.
Inflation is down. The border's secure. We're getting the criminals out of our country. We're restoring merit-based hiring in our country. It says that people who actually deserve jobs and are the most qualified for them are getting them. Again, we're restoring common sense.
Yes. Everything that Trump is doing on the social issues that people are losing their minds and burning down cities over, you mentioned that they're 80-20 issues, which is completely correct.
I mean, they might even be 99-1 at this point.
Honestly, I mean, if you look at the polling, most Americans don't believe that boys have any place in girls' locker rooms.
Exactly.
I mean, I know I played sports in high school. Did you play sports in high school?
I did, yes.
How would you have felt if you had to share a locker room with a boy?
I would have been mortified.
Would have been horrified. I couldn't have done it.
No.
It's not a safe situation to put teenage girls in.
No. Exactly.
Or teenage boys, for that matter. Because boys also deserve, privacy in their own spaces.
Exactly.
And then, the border. I do not believe that the vast majority of Americans think that anyone should be able to come traipsing on into this country.
Yes, because it's also, Trump made headways with Latinos and other minorities in this country, and the left doesn't seem to understand and can't seem to wrap its mind around the fact that even people who came here legally through legal immigration, they want these criminals out of our country because they're like, We came here legally. We did it the right way. It's not fair that all these other people are just coming in. We have no idea who they are, where they came from. And the left just can't seem to wrap its mind around that. Like, they just can't seem to understand that the polling is showing that people who came here through legal channels, people who are American citizens were born here, the vast majority supports getting these criminals out of our country and securing our border.
And not just because it's completely unfair to the people who went through the, frankly, Byzantine process of coming to the country legally.
It takes years.
Aside from the fact that it is fundamentally unfair to them to just allow people who don't care about our processes in, people who came to America because they want a better, safer, more prosperous life for themselves and their families don't want to be at risk of the crime that these gangs are bringing. They don't want their children to be the next Laken Riley, to be the next
Jocelyn Nungare or Rachel Morin.
They don't want that for their family either. There is so much crime that does not need to happen, and the minority groups that shifted towards Trump understand that their kids could be next.
Exactly.
But the people who aren't understanding, they're the ones who are safe from the crime. They're insulated from the impacts of this immigration. People like maybe my least favorite currently sitting politician, Ilhan Omar.
Oh, yes.
Did you see her latest atrocious soundbite?
It did.
Ilhan Omar, the Somali immigrant who is now representing Minnesota in Congress, has stated that America, the country that she is elected to represent and serve the people of, whose taxpayers pay her salary, is one of the worst countries ever. And about as bad as her home country, Somalia, from which she is here as a refugee because Somalia is a war-torn, awful place to be. Do you know what I think about that?
What?
I think she can get a flight back to Somalia.
Yeah. What do you think about my tickets going for?
Probably not a ton. I don't think that many people want to come from here to there. But if it's so horrible here, if you hate America so much. The thing is, I believe that I think Americans have the right to say whatever they want about America.
Exactly.
Like, the First Amendment is very important. It is wonderful. But if you are a member of Congress, if you were elected to represent America, you should have to at least like it.
Yes.
Like, how can you swear to uphold and defend the Constitution if you hate the country?
Exactly. The country that you're supposed to represent.
I mean, people on the right throw around a lot that every Democratic politician hates America, but this woman actually hates America.
Yes. And I think it's that rhetoric that members of Congress and other political elites are spewing that, in a sense, has kind of incited what we saw this past weekend and what we've seen in other cities around the country regarding ICE raids. I think that rhetoric that's coming from, our elected officials on the left is signaling to these people that this is okay, that violence is okay, that that it's okay to just do this, and it's not.
If we want to talk about members of the House of Representatives whose rhetoric is connected to the violence going on, look no further than Hakeem Jeffries.
Yes, I mean, he stood in front of a podium not too long ago and said to all the ICE agents out there that are wearing masks to protect themselves from being harmed while they are doing their job, that they will all be unmasked and we will find out who they are.
And we all remember in 2020, during the so-called Summer of Love, all those riots.
When literally Minneapolis was burning to the ground.
We remember that members of law enforcement, in that case police officers, were targeted and some were literally assassinated.
Yes.
So these calls to unmask ICE agents is very clearly, at the very least, intimidation. it sounds like a threat to me. I don't know about you, but it sounds like a threat to me.
It does. But, okay, we had all these protests going on this past weekend. And, you have the Hakeem Jeffries of the world and all these other left-leaning prominent politicians, out there seemingly encouraging it. But where were they all this past weekend? They weren't out there at the No Kings protests with all these other left-leaning, I would say activists at this point. Where were they all? No, they were all in the Hamptons at the wedding of Huma Abedin and Alex Soros, the son of George Soros.
Couldn't have picked two nicer people.
Literally, they truly deserve each other.
They
truly do. But it's so ironic because at this wedding, it was, the creme de la creme. The menu was the finest food. It was in the Hamptons. There was all kinds of security. And who was in attendance? You had Nancy Pelosi there. You had Chuck Schumer. You had Hakeem Jeffries, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Because if you know anything, Huma Abedin is, Hillary Clinton's longtime little pet.
Think she's the second best known for being Hillary Clinton's personal aide.
Yeah.
Well, but they're all at this wedding with their massive quantities of security in living in their gated communities, and they're insulated from the harm of the policies that they enact. They're not dealing with the crime caused by their immigration policies. They're not dealing with the impacts of inflation the way ordinary Americans are. They're insulated from all of the harm that they cause.
And this is, again, they still can't, since November 5th of last year, they still can't wrap their minds around how Trump won. And it's because Trump connected with the forgotten men and women of this country, and he said to them, I see you, I want to help you, I want to lift you up, and they haven't. They're the antithesis of what they preach.
Trump listened to the grievances of all Americans across race, across socioeconomic status. He listened to all Americans, whereas the Democrats patronize all Americans.
Yes, you have to think the way that they do, and if you don't, you're Hitler, Nazi, garbage, deplorables, whatever else they've called us over the years.
Garbage. That was Joe Biden recently.
Yes, and it was so funny when the White House tried to say that they weren't referring to us people as garbage. They were referring to the garbage that we put out on the street every week to be collected by sanitation workers. That's one for the ages. That's one for the history books.
The spinning out of the Biden White House was ballerina-like. But Trump listened to the people in a way that no one on the left is. And I think we are getting evidence of his groundedness and his connection with ordinary Americans with his little flagpole mounting project.
Yes. So, not too long ago, President Trump announced that he was going to finance the placement of 2 100-foot flagpoles at the White House. And yesterday, those flagpoles went into the ground. And you saw him out there on the White House lawn with the workers that were going to be installing these flagpoles. And President Trump, he knew how tall the flagpoles were going to be. He knew what the flagpoles were going to be made out of. He knew the type of cement that was going to be used to put those flagpoles into the ground. And he stood there and he talked to those workers and he made sure that they were seen. Now, would you see President Biden do something like that?
Well, that would require them allowing President Biden to talk to people for more than a few seconds and without a script. But no, because President Trump, for all of his Manhattan billionaire gold apartment,
he's a builder at his core.
Yeah. This is a man who made his fortune creating buildings, and he never lost that side of himself. He can still just connect to people on their level.
Even still, it was widely reported, during the campaign. He was still talking to the staff at all his properties to see what they were thinking. just like he was talking to, Americans across the country, he was in touch with the working class, the forgotten men and women of this country, and that is why they came out in droves for him on Election Day, and the left still can't understand that.
And we see this again with his leadership style. This is a man who's assembled a spectacular rogues gallery of intelligent and interesting people to surround himself with to help him bring his policies about. And he clearly listens to what they all have to say.
Yes, and again, they're not the typical people that you would find in a presidential cabinet. Mm-hmm. Two of them used to be Democrats, RFK and Tulsi Gabbard. He brought in people.
One of them technically ran against him, albeit in different primaries. But
very true.
Actually, both of them did.
Yeah. But, he brought people together from the business community, private sector. He brought together all these different people. He didn't just pick the typical Washington person who had been so insulated to be in his cabinet. He brought people who had been out there in all different sectors of the economy working and connecting with different people.
Well, the president's been very open about the fact that he felt he went too insidery with his first cabinet.
He often reflects on the turnover that he had during the first term, and he said, he didn't really know Washington that well, and he, kind of just listened to the people around him, and he didn't really know who we could trust and who was kind of just trying to keep the system going. But, since then, he's built an incredible group of people around him that I think he really trusts, and he values what they have to say, and, he listens to them.
It seems like he's found a group of people that are ideologically aligned, so that they all are heading towards the same mission, but have different perspectives, different ways of going about it.
And I think that I think he cares for them, and I think they care about him, and they truly want to see the country succeed. They want to see his presidency succeed, and they want to see his agenda, all of it, come to fruition, which I think is just a stark contrast from what we saw in the first Trump term.
Some of the cabinet even seems to be developing a bit of a friend group in Trump's little entourage, going to the UFC fights.
President Trump went to Camp David a couple weeks ago and took some of his members of his cabinet along. And if you know anything about President Trump, you know he's not a fan of Camp David. He is used to being in places with his name on it at the White House. Camp David needs the Trump treatment. I hope over the next couple of years he makes over Camp David.
I think he'd like it a little better if it was called Camp Donald.
Or Camp Trump, with a nice gold plate that says Camp Trump, or...
Oh, that would be so fun.
It would be amazing.
I think he would enjoy that immensely. I personally think that from what we, the public, have seen at Camp David, there seems to be a rustic...
It's a little antiquated.
...charm to it.
Yeah.
I find that incredibly charming myself, but...
I don't think that that's Trump's style. I think he did say, I think during his first term to a reporter, he said to, Camp David, he goes, it's nice. You know how long you'd like it? For about 30 minutes.
He's a funny one, our president.
He is. He's funniest president. He kills me. Everything he says, I die laughing. It's so funny. All right, well, on the subject of Trump's agenda, we need to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Which is still making its way through Congress. They're still hopefully going to meet that July 4th deadline to get the final bill text to the president's desk. And I know whenever the bill gets to President Trump's desk, the signing ceremony is going to be epic. It's going to be like unlike anything we've ever seen before.
This bill is a tentpole of President Trump's domestic policy regimen. Anything that can be handled in reconciliation is being included, which means it, up to its name, is very big, but is getting as much of his agenda as he can done in one fell swoop.
Yeah, so the bill has passed the House. It's in the Senate now for negotiations. The crux of the Senate version of the bill came out earlier this week. That came out of the Senate Finance Committee, and that included all the tax policies. And in that is an extension, actually making permanent, the 2017 tax cuts. And mind you, if this bill does not pass and the tax cuts are allowed to expire at the end of this year, the majority of households are going to see their taxes go up, and nobody wants that to happen.
If you're watching this, there is a greater than likely chance that your taxes will go up if these tax cuts are not made permanent.
Yeah.
Now, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a tentpole major accomplishment of President Trump's first term, giving the majority of Americans substantial cuts to their taxes. But many of the provisions sunset in 2026. So the Big Beautiful Bill, one of its many tenets is to make those cuts permanent so that Americans' taxes don't go up considerably.
Yes, I mean, it's about 2/3 of households see their taxes go up, and that would amount to a $4 trillion tax increase across the board. So it's very, very important that these tax cuts are made permanent.
That would be catastrophic for the American economy and for millions of households, millions of Americans.
Yes, and then, on top of that, you see a lot of the tax policies that President Trump ran on reflected in this bill. So you see no taxes on tips. You see no taxes on overtime. You see no tax on car interest loan, the interest on car loans. So you see a lot of the promises that President Trump made while he was running in 2024 that are geared toward working class Americans. You see them included in this bill, and importantly, also you see a boost in funding for border security, which in order for ICE to do its job and in order for our country to remain secure and our border to remain secure, this is
for us to maintain our sovereignty.
Yes.
This is completely necessary policies.
Without a secure border, you don't have a sovereign nation.
No.
That's just plain and simple.
We need to be able to control our own territory. That is just part of what being a country is. And so this funding for the border is absolutely necessary, critical funding, and this bill will give us that.
Yes, I mean, and in addition, the bill does make some reforms to Medicaid, which is one of the major entitlement programs. It doesn't make reforms to the country's two largest entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare.
Those cannot be handled under reconciliation, and since this is a reconciliation bill,
there's certain rules that apply and only certain things. There's a lot of certain budget rules that have to be adhered to in order to be able to pass this legislation along party lines.
Which means that we can't touch the two biggest entitlement programs, which is partly why the Big Beautiful Bill has the deficit additions that it does, because the areas where we could see cuts
unfortunately
can't be touched.
Yes. But I mean, on the topic of Social Security and Medicare, they are in financial trouble. And yesterday, the trustees of the Social Security and Medicare programs put out their annual reports that kind of highlights the financial status of these programs. And, they're both going bankrupt. So the Social Security trustees project that Social Security is going to run out by 2034. And the Medicare trustees estimate that Medicare Part A, which is hospital insurance, is going to run out by 2033. And when that happens, these programs don't have borrowing authority, so the Treasury cannot just infuse a bunch of money into these programs to make them solvent and allow them to continue to pay benefits in full.
People will just see their benefits for Social Security
cut by 19% across the board. So regardless of age, income, or need, it doesn't matter if you've been receiving Social Security benefits for a year or if you've been receiving Social Security benefits for 10 years. It doesn't matter how much you've paid into the Social Security program. Your benefits are going to be cut by 19% across the board. And on the Medicare front, when the Medicare Trust Fund runs out, Medicare Part A spending is going to be cut by 11% to bring the payroll tax revenue that's being used to fund these programs in line with the benefits that are being paid out.
It is vital that these programs get put on a sustainable path now, not in 10 years when it's too late to do anything about it, but now when they actually have time to
phase in any adjustments that would be needed to make, and it would give beneficiaries time to plan and adjust.
People don't know right now, people who are looking retirement on the very near horizon, they don't know what their Social Security benefits are going to be, and you can't plan around a major question mark. It's just profoundly unfair to our soon-to-be retired population, people who have been paying into this program their whole adult lives under the promise that, that money is coming back to them, but because they've completely over-leveraged the program, it's not.
Yes.
But as we know, Congress is notoriously terrible at doing things until the very last second.
The 11th hour, yes.
I mean, how many government shutdowns are averted minutes before the deadline?
Yes.
But this is not one of the types of issues where you can, finish the essay minutes before midnight. We're at midnight already, just because they're not insolvent yet. We're kind of reaching the event horizon here, and we need to start taking steps now so that we don't bankrupt these programs.
Yes, and the trustees have been telling us for years that these programs are rapidly approaching insolvency, and still we see our leaders just kicking the can down the curb and not really making an earnest effort to address these programs and put them on a long-term, sustainable financial path.
Well, it's politically challenging.
Yeah.
The problem with reforming Social Security and Medicare is that despite the fact that the economics are very obvious, the politics are where it's really tricky.
Yes.
Because we've let it go on for so long and allowed the money to be spent elsewhere and the policies to get so bad that we're kind of out of any perfect options.
Mm-hmm.
It's about picking the least bad of not great situations. And understandably, for elected officials who have to run on either a 2-year or a 6-year time frame, they're as, if not more, concerned about keeping their jobs than fixing this program. That's why Congress leaves things to the last minute constantly, because unless they're not going to take the controversial and tricky decision and have it impact their primaries or their elections if they don't absolutely have to.
Exactly.
And Congress is going to have to make tough decisions and make some unpopular moves in order to save these programs, because they are dying, and American seniors deserve to know what their benefits are going to look like. They deserve to be able to retire securely and be able to take care of themselves in the way that they've been promised to. And they've been robbed of that security.
Yeah, I mean, the political will just isn't there right now. But if they're really going to do something, that political will needs to get there real fast.
And it's not right now.
No.
But I don't think people realize what these programs going insolvent means. I think people see every other government program, you can just throw money at it from other sources, and that's deemed sufficient. But Medicare and Social Security, as you mentioned, don't have borrowing power.
Yes, so Medicare and Social Security, they're financed primarily by payroll tax revenue. So I'm sure you all see in your paychecks that payroll tax is deducted from them, and that revenue goes to pay the current benefits that are being paid out of the Social Security and Medicare programs. And the amount of benefits that can be paid from the programs is limited to the amount of payroll tax revenue that is being taken in. So over time, because we're an aging population and people are living longer, more is having to be paid out from the program, and not enough is coming into the program to continue to pay benefits in full.
The combination of us living longer and our birth rate is down. The largest generation,
The baby
boomers, are all either retiring or about on the verge of retirement. I think the youngest baby boomers are in their early 60s now.
Correct, yeah.
So they are all getting close to the retirement age. And Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z, the other generations in the workforce right now, are not nearly as big as the baby boomers. And we're only seeing that trend continue with Gen Alpha getting smaller and smaller. So we just don't have the same amount of people paying in as taking out, which is sort of how those funds can disappear rather quickly.
Yes. So needless to say, again, for the umpteenth year in a row, the trustees have reminded us that Medicare and Social Security are quickly going bankrupt, and only time will tell if the political will somehow manifests itself to do something about this.
And let's hope it does, because our seniors deserve better.
They do.
They really do. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Cocktail Party Politics.
Yes, and we will be back with you again next week to discuss everything happening inside the Beltway and outside.
We cannot wait to see you there and hope you enjoy.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.